In this video, I'd like to talk about time. You know, for the Sasquatch people, time is not 3D linear like it is for us. It's, and there's many, many different aspects that I would like to talk about. But very early on in my journey, probably in the first year or two, they started teaching me about time and how it's so much different for them. One thing I'd like to mention briefly is, you know, people who are UFO abductees, they often talk about time loss, where there is time that's just unaccounted for. You know, they feel like they're in the woods or they've gone somewhere. It seems like it's like a half an hour or something, and then when they look at their watch, it's like 4 hours. I've even heard examples of people, a couple people in the woods together, like my friend Randy Brisson and a friend of his, went in and their watches both stopped at the identical time. And let's say 5 o'clock, for instance. And they didn't notice that they had stopped. But when they got home, they said, wow, it's sure dark for like 5 o'clock. And then they realized it was like 9 o'clock. And when they compared stories, they both saw that their watches had stopped at 5 o'clock. So, you know, 4 hours of lost time. Now, I do know that the Sasquatch people do have a connection with UFOs. I've experienced that myself. There was one really amazing experience. I'll get into that a little bit and kind of veer off the time topic, just to talk about the connection between UFOs and Sasquatch. Well, it has been reported by abductees and people who have been on craft that I think it's in the top 6 or 7 or maybe even the 5th most common being that people see on crafts are actually Sasquatch people, which is quite interesting. You know, it makes you wonder if Chewbacca, you know, from Star Wars was based on a Sasquatch. And there are rumors and stories that that is indeed the case. But I'll share one story with you here. One time Randy Brisson and I were walking and hiking way back in the woods. And it was the ideal day. It was a really desolate, quiet area. We didn't see another person all day, and we thought this is the perfect time for interaction with the Sasquatch. Because, you know, quite often they don't like to do anything meaningful or interact with you when there are other people around. And that speaks to the 15-minute rule that we discovered, and I've experienced many times. And speaks to the fact that they don't like to do anything meaningful contact-wise, generally, when other people are around. And the 15-minute rule is that if they're interacting with you, and you know, like we're talking about like whoops and tree knocks, energy, even sightings and stuff of that nature, and then all of a sudden it stops, just goes completely quiet, nothing happens. Almost every time, like clockwork, you see people coming, and it's about 15 minutes later, and it's like they stop 15 minutes before anybody arrives. But on this particular day, you know, like I said, we thought, wow, this is a perfect day. We're probably going to have some great interaction. Everything was perfect. But nothing actually happened until we were almost all the way back to our cars. We were maybe a mile away. And we stopped at this place where they had lumber displays or whatever. This is way out in the woods on like a logging road. And there was a building with a tin roof on top. And so there was a nice big bench where we just sat down on by this building, and we were actually just discussing, like, wow, you know, like, kind of surprised that nothing actually happened. And then all of a sudden we started getting that energy, that we could feel them around, and we started hearing things. And Randy's hearing was much better than mine. So he could actually hear them walking around us, and he could actually hear them breathing. And so they were very, very close. And like I said, I could feel them energetically in a big way. And so all of a sudden we had a couple little rocks thrown in our direction, which to me is like a "hello, we're here" introduction kind of thing. It's never a threatening thing. I mean, they have thrown on occasion a bigger rock to just get our attention or to startle us, but it never seems threatening or like we're in danger in any sense. So we heard, we saw a couple rocks land and heard a couple rocks, and like I said, Randy was sharing them. And then we discovered something really, really important. Randy and I was here, and he was right beside me. We were standing beside each other, and a little rock came arching right over our heads and landed right in front of us. And there was an answer in that, because I had long considered, boy, these guys are sure accurate with their throws. But what I figured out is, yeah, I think that they are accurate if they want to be. But I think in this case, because Randy could hear them breathing all around us, that an individual was right behind us, and he just blip, tossed it over our heads, and it landed right there. So that was an interesting lesson for me. And so we're, hanging around there, and all of a sudden, bang! A big rock went off the tin roof, like made a big crashing sound. And you got to remember, this is still fairly deep in the woods. There's absolutely no other humans around. No other explanation for it. We knew it was our friends. And that went on, I think they did that about 5 or 6 times, like big rocks off the roof. It was quite dramatic and quite fun, actually. It was pretty neat. And so anyway, as all this is going on, suddenly we looked up into the sky and we saw like a perfect saucer-shaped UFO right up above us as all this Sasquatch activity is going on. And we saw it go into a cloud, and there was only like 1 or 2 clouds in the sky. And it went into this cloud and it didn't come up. But it was a classic saucer-shaped UFO. So there was that connection between the Sasquatch and the UFOs going on there. And to kick it up even another notch, there was a red-tailed hawk that was watching us from, maybe 50 yards away in a tree. Like a spirit bird, or maybe a shape-shifting Sasquatch. Or they're just looking through its eyes. But that kind of thing too, which is really, really common with the Sasquatch, where they utilize animals to watch you, and instead of, showing themselves in their true form. And so all 3 of these things were going on, and we were watching the hawk, the red-tailed hawk, for a while, which I've never really seen another one since. And it flew right directly over our heads, and then landed in another tree, not far from us, and was observing us again, which is very common for when a Sasquatch is looking through their eyes, or shapeshifted into one, whichever the case may be. And so, yeah, there is a connection between the Sasquatch and UFOs, in my opinion. And, the Sasquatch are here to teach us about our true nature, our eternal nature, our connected nature with everything. And I think that the benevolent aliens, or many of them, are doing the same thing. So I think the connection has a lot to do with that. And the fact, like I said, that people have observed Sasquatch on craft. Often when we have experienced episodes of time loss, there's a lot of other activity that goes on as well, like zapping, for example. And there's so many diverse examples of zapping, like Sometimes it just, you feel like you're walking through a force field, or a force field is holding you back. One time Randy and I experienced what was like a sound wave coming at us. And just before that happened, we sensed them all around us. I believe I was getting my third eye sensation, which quite often happens just before some activity. And we were hearing them around, and this sound wave was really, really interesting. And it's also interesting to note that I'm almost positive that if somebody else had been there other than Randy Brisson and myself, they probably would not have experienced it. Because I do not believe that we heard it audibly. I think we heard it in our head. And what it was like a, it sounded like that in our head, and we could feel the energy coming at us. And it went right inside of us, like whoosh, rattled around inside, and then shot up out of the top of our heads. So my point on that is there's a lot of different examples of zapping, and maybe I'll do a video on some more of those. But they often accompany other things like time loss, for instance. I remember stuff like, for example, like I said, you can walk up a trail, and it seems like it takes you 20 minutes to go up, or vice versa, and 5 minutes back. And there's just no explanation for it that we can figure out, other than they're teaching us lessons in time. And it's the only thing I can think of. Or there's something going on, you know, like that we don't realize. That lost time, they're doing something with us. And one time there was an interesting zapping episode when we did experience that exact thing. When we went into an area and it took us like 20 minutes and then 5 coming back. And what happened there was we both got hit up with a zap, but it was a really interesting one. And I've experienced something like this a couple times. What it felt like was like a sensual energy. It wasn't like sexual, not like that, but it felt sensual for some reason. And I've experienced this a few times. And this particular one, actually both times, it felt like it was almost like some energy coming up from the ground. And it was like, I don't know, it just came up like I'm trying to think of the right word, like a scan, starting at your feet and going gradually up. And that was really, really interesting. And like I said, it was sensual but not sexual. It was just kind of like the feeling and the sensation. But that happened, like I said, when we were experiencing time loss. The difference between going into an area and coming out was quite dramatic. Like there was no other explanation for it other than there was some time manipulation. So like I said, their understanding of time is not like our 3D linear understanding of time. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the different experiences that I've had and how they've taught me about time, including what I'm going to talk about now. There was a very dramatic lift that I discovered when I got out of my vehicle one time, and there it was right before my eyes. And it's worthy to note that what I find very, very interesting about finding this glyph that was right outside of my car when I parked it, and I was just planning on going for a hike. It was just right there, which is often how they do things. What is interesting about it is that Sue and I had been discussing time and their ability to manipulate it outside of our, like I said, 3D linear understanding of it. And when I discovered this glyph outside of my car, I didn't realize immediately that it was about time, but it came to me when I started thinking about it and pondering it for a bit. And now that's exactly how I see it. And it was one of the first powerful lessons that they gave me in time and their understanding of it as opposed to ours. And so once again, I don't believe in coincidence with them. They've proven it to me many, many, many times in so many different ways that coincidence is not what is occurring generally when you're dealing with them. And so like I said, Sue and I were discussing time, and there was this glyph right before my eyes as soon as I stepped out of my car.
Time has come today.
Now let me get back to this amazing glyph that I discovered outside of my driver's side door immediately as I stepped out of my vehicle. And there it was laid out on the asphalt. And what I want you to notice is, if you look in the lower left-hand corner of the picture, you can see two peel sticks that are basically vertical, but at angles. One is at a 1 o'clock angle, and one is at an 11 o'clock angle. And then there's the horizontal piece that goes across and is, I guess, at a 2 o'clock angle. So focus on the horizontal piece at the 2 o'clock angle. So anyway, I was standing there looking at this glyph and took a picture of it. And then within moments after I did that, something caught my attention to my immediate left, or I looked over to my immediate left for some reason. In retrospect, I know what that reason was. I was guided to look to the left. But anyway, I looked over to my left, and it was only a matter of moments. And when I looked back, the glyph was changed, almost right before my eyes. Like I said, it changed within moments of me looking to my left. And when I looked back, the horizontal piece at the 2 o'clock angle was taken away and was raised over a couple pieces that were kind of crossed together just above it. And as you can see, it now stands above them, or sits above them. And what's interesting to note is that there was absolutely no wind that day. And the two pieces of peel stick that it sits above are raised off the ground, probably about an inch. And so there is no way that that horizontal piece at the 2 o'clock angle could have ended up there other than by being picked up and placed there. And if you notice, on the right hand side of this picture, it actually almost seems to be tucked in as well. So it's virtually impossible for that to have ended up like that without something supernatural or without the involvement of the forest people. So as you can see in review, that horizontal piece at the 2 o'clock angle is now above the two pieces and slightly tucked in on the right. Virtually impossible without some beautiful funny business from my friends. And so, as I went on my hike, I must have been out for, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, something of that nature. And when I came back, the glyph was changed again. And this was a very quiet weekday. And there were not a lot of people around. And I do not believe that the glyph was changed by anybody but them. And it was just another part of the message. And so it was changed. And the horizontal piece that was tucked under the two pieces in the second picture was now at a different angle, raised up and at a 10 o'clock angle. And if you notice, a couple pieces to the right of the first two pictures are completely removed. Other than that, it seems pretty much the same. And so, like I said, at the time, Sue and I were doing a lot of talking about time and how they manipulate time and how it's not 3D linear like our understanding of time. And they've proven that to me in many, many, many instances. But when I first saw these glyphs, it was when I was first starting to consider those possibilities. And so one of the things that I take away from this glyph is, once again, they were teaching me about time. And one of the things that I will always remember and always cherish is the fact that when I looked to my left initially after looking at the first glyph, or the same glyph, but when I initially took the first picture of it, when my attention was taken to my left and I looked back and it was changed, that's something that really shook my world. I was just, wow. You know, I remember considering, wow, I guess they were maybe cloaked and they did it right before my eyes, or they did it with telekinesis, I believe is the word. Or I'm not sure how they did it, but it really taught me a lot about their abilities and how amazing they are. But yes, these series of glyphs, or the series of changes in this glyph, definitely represented time to me, and it was a big building block to my understanding as it is now. One of my major lessons in time in relation to the Sasquatch people revolves around the fact that they have proven to me on a number of occasions that they know that I'm going to discover something or come across an understanding, or that I'm going to do something years, in some cases, before I do. Literally years. And I've got some great examples of that. And I'll get into that now. And some of them revolve around glyphs, where I have seen something in a glyph after the fact, years after I took the picture, and realized without question, because of my understanding of so many of the symbols and what they mean, that they knew years prior that I was going to come to that understanding of a particular symbol or a particular glyph. And so, as I said, it's happened many, many times where I will look at a glyph that I took a picture of years prior, and my understanding and knowing has evolved to the point where I can look back on ones that they made years prior, and without question, they knew that I was going to come to that understanding. You know, I do have the advantage of dealing with glyphs and their language for many, many years, so I hope that I'm explaining this properly, but to me it's a fact. They literally know years before things that you will do or things that you will come to understand, and they're already connecting with you and communicating with you according to that understanding, as I said, years before you actually consciously come to it. So before I get into some of the glyphs and what I discovered, I'd like to talk about a friend of mine who attended my camp out a few years ago. And this also speaks to the fact that they can go into the recesses of somebody's mind and their memories and pull something out that will ring a big bell with them and give them no doubt that they are capable of these things. I've mentioned this one before, but there was a lady who attended one of my campouts, as I said, a few years back, and she got her first zap. That was how she described it. She said they zapped me. And what they did is they gave her this feeling of what she described as tingly bubbles. Now, I'm sure that's not the exact words, but that's effectively what she said. A feeling of when, as she described it, she had her first kiss with a boy. That tingly, euphoric, tickly kind of feeling, I guess you would say. And they zapped her for the very first time at my campout, and she got that exact feeling. She had only had it once. As I said, when she had her first kiss, only had it once, and it was something that she knew intimately and would never forget. And they zapped her and gave her that memory back, the exact same feeling. So that to me proves proves without any question, and proved to her and opened her eyes up wide, that they could access the recesses of her mind and her memories and bring that feeling back so that she would know and she would understand what they are capable of. And it was remarkable. The same thing happens with glyphs, but this was a little bit different example of that, and I just found it amazing. I actually recorded her testimony on one of the campout videos I've done, and I've spoken of it since then as well. Recently, I believe. But just try to imagine that they went back into her memory and pulled that one particular feeling and memory out that she had only had once, but she knew. It was a special moment, and they gave it back to her. That speaks of the fact that time is not 3D linear for them like it is with us, and that they can travel back and forward in time, and that's a huge advantage. And so, for teaching, for the teaching clans, like mine is. So, absolutely remarkable, and I think that proves my point and my findings that time is not 3D linear for them like it is with us. It's a fact. It's absolutely a fact. So let's look at a few glyphs that absolutely prove to me what I've been saying, that the Sasquatch people knew without a doubt years before I came to the realization that I would come to that realization. And we'll use the Y stick as a classic example. Now that's not the only one, but it's good for the purpose of this demonstration. So, as you can see in this first picture, the fish glyph has always been associated with Susan and I and our connection, my wife Susan, and they've been using that for many, many years, and I've received dozens upon dozens of them. Can't even count how many. And I've always associated it, like I said, with my relationship with Susan. And I was looking back at my pictures one day because I wanted to make a video on the fish glyph. And I was looking for this one in particular because I like the little touch of the leaf in it. And it's just a really, really beautiful example, and it's just a gorgeous glyph. And so I was looking through my pictures, like I said, and I came upon it, and then it struck me. Because it had not been long before that I came to the realization that the Y stick means man, Sasquatch, connected. So the two prongs on top, one is man, one is Sasquatch, and the long stem is connected. Quite often, one of the prongs will be longer, and that would be associated with the Sasquatch, because quite often, as they do with rocks and other things, the size indicates the actual size of the clan member or the person or what they're talking about. So that's often the case as well. So anyway, I came upon this glyph and I was just stunned because I had never ever thought of it before, because I did not have that realization that the Y stick was man Sasquatch connected when I first took the picture and for many years later. And then I saw the Y was curved into it, and it just hit me like a hammer over the head. And I knew instantly, oh my God, they already knew years before that I was going to come to that realization. And as you can see, it fits in perfectly with the message. The fish glyph is about Susan and myself and our connection. And the Y curved into it talks about man and Sasquatch connected. So it's basically saying you and Susan are connected, and we are connected to you, and man and Sasquatch in general are connected. So it's a beautiful message, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I knew instantly. If we go on to the next one, I found this in the campground literally the very next day when I came to the realization, or came to the agreement, with the Sasquatch people, because that's how it works. You say, okay, the Y stick means this, or the open triangle, which is little Bud's signature, means this, etc. And it's like magic almost. They start communicating with you with that meaning, and it's obvious. And like I said, if they're already communicating with you years before with that meaning, before you're consciously aware. So I found this in the campground, and that's the Y stick. Man, Sasquatch connected. And the rock that is leaned up on the prongs simply means or indicates the individual who left it there. And so that was literally given to me the next day when I came to the realization that the Y stick meant man, Sasquatch connected. The next picture is a classic. It's the tent glyph that Fortunate drew when he saw Sue and I in our tent, and we heard him, or Sue heard him breathing in the bushes outside of the tent. And as you can see, it has both of us inside the tent, and you can see the other stick on the outside, exactly in the place where she heard him. And it's just a perfect tent. It even has tent pegs, it has the tent floor. And if you draw your attention to the roof, there's something that I never noticed initially, because I didn't know what it meant. I was wondering, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I didn't even recognize it as a Y stick, to be honest. And as you can see, there's the typical X, the friendship welcome X, which is typical of that message, because the relationship is one of connection and friendship with myself and Susan and the Sasquatch clan up here. But I was puzzled with, what does that other thing mean off to the left at the 11 o'clock angle? And then one day, about a month ago, I was looking at it, and I said, oh my God, it's the Y. It's the man Sasquatch connected Y. Once again, he's talking about his connection to us, their connection to us, our connection to everything. And it's just a beautiful message. And it just hit me over the head like a bag of hammers. Just so obvious and just so beautiful. And so once again, it just proves to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they knew years before I did that I was going to come to that understanding. And they were already communicating with me according to that understanding. Just a beautiful thing. And this one is just a beautiful glyph, and one of hope. And it simply means man, Sasquatch connected. And, in times when I'm down or struggling with things as they are today, even though I do know that there has to be darkness before the light, so in that way we have to celebrate, in a sense, what's going on today, as hard as that seems to be. But in any event, no matter how down you are or how down I am, when I see something laid up in a tree like that, and the message it speaks of, it really raises my spirits up and makes me feel really, really good. Man, Sasquatch connected. And they're here to help us. So I hope that I explained this well. It's when you've experienced it all yourself, there's a big knowing that goes with it too. And, this is just one example. There's so many examples, or a few examples, I should say. There's so many that it absolutely speaks of what I said. And so, time in the Sasquatch, it's very, very much different than our understanding of time.
street one day. A pretty lady looked at me and said her diamond watch had stopped cold dead. And I said, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? If so, I can't imagine why. We've all got time enough to cry. And I was walking down the street